Today we are joined by Sioux McKenna, the Director for the Center of Postgraduate Studies at Rhodes University and Fellow at the Stiers Wallenberg Research Center. Good afternoon and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon.
So criteria used when measuring university rankings are often unrelated, and this creates a space for inaccuracy. What are some of the most popular criteria utilized, and in what way are they unrelated?
Thanks. Each of these big international ranking systems uses its own formula, so they differ slightly, but actually they overlap quite a lot. And the most common things that they look at are the research publications. So they'll look at research outputs. They'll look at particularly research publications in Nature and Science and a couple of other big journals. They'll look at, some of them look at population popularity surveys. So they'll ask the general population to rate universities according to their reputation. They'll look at things like even how many Nobel Prize winners. If you get a Nobel Prize winner on your staff, then you will jump up the rankings because that counts for quite a lot. So they're all sorts of different criteria that get added together, but they're not really related to each other. So we're really adding, apples and pears, and then coming up with a number that tells you that this university is better than that university. We don't really, I think the general public doesn't really understand that it's not really telling you that much about the nature of the university.
The ranking of universities is inarguably a neocolonial process. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, I think this is a bit of a controversial position that I take, but these ranking systems treat all universities identically. So they measure them all using the exact same scale. But it may be that a university is less interested in producing research publications for the global north, and it might be more interested in community upliftment or in providing their students with a learning experience that really gets them grounded in the public good and gets them involved in projects that are relevant to their context. Now, none of those things are going to count in the rankings process.
And then South African universities are also ranked internationally, and they often get caught in a trap. How do you believe that these institutions may be able to escape?
Sure. It's almost impossible to escape because these rankings are so popular and they have so much power in the press that the average person sort of sees this as a mark, a badge of honor, and will make decisions for their children about which university to send them to on the basis of these big international systems, not realizing that actually you need to get much more information about what's going to suit your child's interests and what it is that they want from their educational experience. So it's almost impossible to pull out of these things. In fact, some universities choose not to participate. So they will not submit all the data and put in place all the structures that these ranking systems want. But they are still included in the ranking systems because all that the ranking systems do is use the publicly available data about those universities. So it becomes impossible to pull out of them. I think all that we can do, those of us who are in universities, is to just try and encourage the public to realize that it's not the full picture, and that actually you need to just be aware that different universities offer very different experiences, and you really need to find the university that's going to offer you or your children the kind of experience that suits your interests in life. And particularly if you have an interest in the public good, in community engagement, in learning how to be a knowledge creator that can actually serve society, you may, those are not things that are going to be indicated in a ranking system. Those are not measured in a ranking system. So if that's something that is important to you, then you shouldn't use a ranking system as a basis on which to decide which is the best university.
And then if it were not for ranking processes, what would you believe would be an alternative and viable measure to classify universities along a grading curve?
Yeah, that is a challenging question. It's so much easier to criticize current processes than to come up with better ones. So that's a really good question. I do think that we need to just try and help people to understand that they need to have more nuanced systems, that they need to kind of do their homework more. I would like us in South Africa to have systems, I wouldn't call them ranking systems, but I'd like us to have processes whereby the public are better informed about different aspects of quality in higher education, aspects that are not captured by the ranking systems. It is undoubted that in South Africa we've got some really excellent universities, and I'm afraid to say we've also got some really problematic universities. And then, of course, within a really great university, you might have a really weak department, and within a problematic university, you might have a fantastic program. So, these are all things to be weighed up. I would like to see better discussions by South African universities in the public press about the different things that we value, and in particular, the idea that universities are meant to be, at least in part, responsible for developing graduates who care about society, who have a responsibility to the public, who are not only invested in their own, success and sort of material goods, that they also have a deep commitment to society. I'd like to see ways of making it clear to the public which universities will expend time and energy in nurturing those kind of attributes in their students.
Now, the overarching themes of transformation, social justice, and public good are incredibly important. How do you believe that they can be incorporated into existing systems?
Yeah, I think that as universities, we need to get better at saying this very explicitly, that going to university is not just about getting a piece of paper that credentials you for a job in industry. It's not just about getting a set of skills that make you ready for a particular workplace. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that those are almost bonuses from a good university education, and that the real focus of a good university education is that our students develop this real transformative relationship to knowledge, a commitment to society, which of course includes both people and the planet. And I think that we need to make it clear, not just to assume that this is part of our curricula, but to actually have very explicit conversations with our students, with each other, with parents, with industry. The role of a university is meant to be to serve all of society. And it's not just meant to be to make sure that our graduates can go out and get better jobs and bigger houses and bigger cars. Good for them if they manage to do that. But that shouldn't be the driving force. And one of the things I often say to my students is to remember that public higher education is subsidized by taxpayers, which means that it should be good for all people in this country to have universities, even those people who never set foot on a campus, because every time they pay VAT on some goods, or they pay PAYE on their salary, they are actually investing in having universities. So it should be good for them. It shouldn't just be good for our graduates. And I think that this, to ensure that universities perform that function, means that we need to have lots more conversation with our students, so we instill in them that this is part of the privilege of having a higher education. So that's where I talk about the public good, this idea that universities should be a private good, sure, in other words, good for the individual student, but not just a private good. It should also be a public good, good for the whole of society. And I could even go so far as to say that there are cases where having a university can be a public bad. In other words, where it's bad for the public. And there, I mean, where our universities become so fixated on employability and scientific progress at the cost of the planet. So it becomes possible that we actually educate, let's say we educate an accountant or a lawyer to become an expert in helping industries to avoid paying taxes. Or we can have an engineer who can become an expert in how to frack the planet for gases and cause pollution in the water system. Mm-hmm. So it's possible for a university to actually be bad for the public. And so that's where I would like to see much more conversations about why a university has to be good for the public, not just for the individual students, but actually for all of us that are in society.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing some of your insights with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. That was Sioux McKenna, Director for the Center of Postgraduate Studies at Rhodes University and Fellow at the Stiers-Wallenberg Research Center, talking to us about the arbitrary nature of university rankings. And that brings us to the end of this afternoon's show. Remember that this segment can be found on both our Facebook and Twitter pages. From myself, Humairaa Mayet, and the entire team at Salam Media, thank you for tuning in. Until next week, Tuesday, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.